Mom. What are you doing today?
Providence Place, owned by the Sisters of Providence, an ideal rental setting for retirees to continue their active, independent lifestyles. We have bright 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, a magnificent chapel with daily mass, restaurant-style dining, and wellness and entertainment programs. Call for a tour, 413-534-9700.
Mom, call me when you're not so busy.
Coming up on this edition of Reel to Reel.
Sister Paula Robillard reflects on her 30 years as a catechetical leader. I'm Rebecca Drake, and I'll have the story.
The story of 11 North Adams High School friends in the Vietnam War. And the annual Faith on Fire revival will be coming to you virtually. These stories are coming your way next on Reel to Reel. Hello and welcome to Reel to Reel. Last month, the Independent Task Force on the Response to Sexual Abuse in the Diocese of Springfield issued a survey asking for public input to help them in their charge of improving how allegations are handled. Carolee McGrath has an update now on the findings of the survey and the work of the task force.
Retired Superior Court Judge Daniel Ford, the chair of the Independent Task Force on the Response to Sexual Abuse, says he's grateful for all who took part in a recent survey which asked participants their view of how the Diocese of Springfield is handling allegations of abuse. The task force is charged with making recommendations to improve the process.
I'm pleased to say that the response from people was very strong. We had responses from priests, deacons, teachers, people who volunteer in the parish, and basically the people in the pews. And I just want to say, I want to thank them.
The task force, which meets weekly, will be informed by the survey and the Judge Vilas report, which found allegations of sexual abuse against former Springfield Bishop Christopher Weldon to be credible. Those allegations dated back to the 1960s. The task force will also seek input from sexual abuse survivors themselves.
A very constant theme was that the church has to have more transparency. People say, we don't know what's going on. It can be months or years when we hear something, but yet we are told nothing. I agree with them. I think you look back at the history of the church or the diocese. I think that has been a failing, and we are trying to come up with ways, reasonable ways, that the process can be more transparent and people will know what is going on.
Judge Ford also says people recommended that the diocese refer all allegations to law enforcement. Last April, the Diocese Office of Safe Environment and Victim Assistance entered into a memorandum of understanding with the 3 district attorneys in Western Mass.
One of the key aspects that it's important to underscore is that anytime the diocese, anytime the Office of Safe Environment and Victim Assistance receives an allegation, it's our responsibility to make sure that in a very timely manner, we get that information to law enforcement. So the framework of the MOU sets forth the steps that we will take to notify the proper DA's offices of this information that is being shared with us. So unequivocally, the first thing we do is we report to civil authorities, that being the district attorney's offices.
As far as preventing abuse, for years the diocese has required criminal background checks on employees or volunteers. There is also mandatory virtues training or protecting God's children training for adults. For kids, they use the Circle of Grace program, which was developed out of the Archdiocese of Omaha, and that program helps equip kids with the knowledge of how to tell a trusted adult if something makes them uncomfortable.
While the task force continues gathering input, members say they remain focused on the mission to protect the vulnerable and promote healing for survivors.
So much of our work isn't just reporting to law enforcement as mandated reporters. We have a significant amount of work to do to bring about healing and reconciliation for the faith community and for survivors and their families.
The final report of the task force is expected early next year. Reporting for Reel to Reel, I'm Carolee McGrath.
After 30 years of catechetical ministry, Sister of St. Joseph Paula Robillard recently retired from diocesan service. Catholic Communications' Rebecca Drake sat down with Sister Paula on her last day at the office as she reflected on the highlights of her ministry and the legacy she leaves.
Sister of St. Joseph Paula Robillard came to the diocesan offices for a 3-year commitment as a catechetical consultant and stayed for 30 years. Throughout those 3 decades, she has promoted a vision of catechesis as central to the life of the Church.
I think catechesis is the most important thing that happens in a church community. Liturgy certainly is, but in order to fully participate in liturgy, you need to fully understand what's going on, and that's what happens in a catechetical program.
She doesn't hesitate when asked what the highlights of her years as faith formation director were.
The people that I've worked with, parish volunteers, parish catechetical leaders, it's just been a real privilege to work with women and men who are so committed to the church, so truly committed to the church.
An especially meaningful memory for Sister Paula is the privilege of being asked to speak at the funerals of many of those catechetical leaders in the Springfield Diocese.
It was then that I realized that I had touched them as much as they had touched me. You know, the diocese has been very, very fortunate with the men and women they've had working in their parishes.
Another highlight of her years of diocesan ministry has been working with former Springfield Bishop Mitchell Rosansky, who was recently installed as the 10th Archbishop of St. Louis, Missouri.
He is just the nicest person you would ever want to meet. Outside of being the bishop, he is just a nice person. He always respected you, even though he disagreed with you.
In her last 4 years at the diocese, Sister Paula renewed her connection to parish life by serving on Bishop Rosansky's parish visit team.
That really was a wonderful experience. I really enjoyed that, as did the bishop. I mean, to get to see the parish from the inside out instead of from the outside in, you know, and to be able to talk with people, be comfortable with people, have them be comfortable with you.
During her retirement, Sister Paula will continue to share her passion for catechesis by volunteering at St. Patrick Parish in Springfield.
There's a lot of people that are searching for something. And I think that in our parish catechetical programs, we have to help them. We have to recognize that they're searching, and then we have to help them to feel that this is a place where they can be at home.
And in addition to the joy of spending time with her large, extended family, Sister Paula will continue to live the charism of her life as a Sister of St. Joseph of Springfield.
I feel very blessed that God called me first to religious life and then to the Sisters of St. Joseph, because I know that I stand on the shoulders of great women who did wonderful things in this diocese. You know, who built up Cathedral High School and Holyoke Catholic High School, who built up the Catholic school system, and then great women who worked in the diocese and for religious education.
So, while she may be the last religious sister and the last Sister of St. Joseph to work in the diocesan offices, their legacy remains.
I would tell you that many of those catechetical leaders that I talked about went to our schools, consider themselves alumni of the Sisters of St. Joseph and supporters and friends of the Sisters of St. Joseph. So in that sense, we continue to go, you know, to live on.
As she leaves her office in the Chancery on Elliott Street, her heart is filled with memories.
Besides the memory of all the wonderful people that I've worked with, I also bring the memory of the spirit of love and joy that exists in the church in so many ways, and from the people, and certainly from the Sisters of St. Joseph.
And as she considers opportunities for future volunteer work, one thing is certain.
As a member of the Sisters of St. Joseph, I'll continually be called to care for the dear neighbor, to love people, to be the community of the love of God, and to be active as that.
A 30-year commitment to the diocese concludes. A lifetime commitment to religious service to be continued. For Real to Real, I'm Rebecca Drake.
Congratulations, Sister Paula. We really hope you're enjoying your well-deserved retirement. And still to come on Real to Real, the traditional Midsummer Faith on Fire Catholic Revival is coming your way virtually with a new name. We'll have the story. And in honor of Veterans Day, Steve Kiltonick introduces us to a North Adams author who chronicled the Vietnam War experience of 11 high school friends. These stories are all still to come on Real to Real.
Gather the people.
The Chalice of Salvation, your weekly spiritual connection. I'm Passion's Brother Terrence Scanlon, your Chalice host, inviting you to take time out of your busy day and join us Sunday morning. We welcome Father Warren Savage as our Mass presider and celebrate the 33rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. The Chalice of Salvation, your spiritual connection, Sunday mornings at 10 on 22 News, WWLP, and coming up next on Fox 23, WXXA.
Hi, Mom. What are you doing today?
Providence Place, owned by the Sisters of Providence, an ideal rental setting for retirees to continue their active, independent lifestyles. We have bright 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, a magnificent chapel with daily mass, restaurant-style dining, and wellness and entertainment programs. Call for a tour, 413-534-9700.
Mom, call me when you're not so busy.
The Faith on Fire Charismatic Rally held each August was canceled this year due to the pandemic, but organizers are preparing to release a virtual rally called Fire of Hope in the coming days. Carolee McGrath returns now with the story.
All right, you're going to start recording in 5, 4, 3.
There is a full-blown production going on at Sacred Heart Parish in Feeding Hills, as the organizers of the Faith on Fire Catholic Rally have had to pivot this year, just like everyone else.
We lost Faith on Fire because of the pandemic that we have currently this year. So I went to Deb and I said, let's put something together, give the people, feed the people something.
Faith on Fire, a 2-night event with speakers, praise and worship music and adoration, is typically held at the end of August each year. But in 2020, it's going virtual under a new name, the Fire of Hope Charismatic Catholic Rally. Mike Messier, a parishioner at Sacred Heart and member of the Knights of Columbus Agawam Council 5585, has become the director, production crew, and editor of the rally. Deb and Peter Brian Sesko have become the speakers and producers, all in an effort to point people toward Jesus. Pete is the Grand Knight of Council 5585, and Deb is the pastoral minister at Sacred Heart.
We didn't want it to sound exactly like Faith on Fire because you can't replace that, but we wanted to give people hope, and people, because of COVID, have seemed to have lost a lot of their hope, so we were trying to bring that more of a forth in the first, that you always have hope with Christ.
Similar to the live event, the virtual Fire of Hope will include speakers, including Wally and Barbara Dano of Our Lady of the Lake Parish in Southwick. Wally was hospitalized because of COVID and was put on a ventilator, while Barbara had to recover from the illness at home. Other speakers include Sharon Drennan, who recorded a prayer before adoration. There will also be praise and worship music. Jack Uros, youth from St. Cecilia's Parish in Wilbraham, and Psalm 33 were all taped at separate times as safety was a top concern.
And the fire is the Holy Spirit. It's just like Faith on Fire. It's a fire rally. So the fire of hope is the same thing. The fire of the Holy Spirit with the hope of better days to come.
Usually about 500 to 600 people crowd this lawn each night of the Faith on Fire prayer event. And while it is virtual this year and a bit different, the hope is that even more people will be able to view it and take part and be touched by the Holy Spirit.
And we're hoping to have this broadcast, should be ready by the day after Thanksgiving. And it's going to be both on YouTube, Facebook, and whatever else media I can get out there.
While Mike, Deb, and Pete and other volunteers have been at this for 2 months and counting, they say it's worth it.
That's a retake.
Even when things don't go as planned.
Yes, it is. It is a labor of love. It's twofold. I found Jesus. He's in my life, and I want somebody else that might be viewing this to find that love as well.
Well, it's just remembering who is always there for you. It's God. It's Jesus. It's the Holy Spirit.
More information on Fire of Hope can be found on the parish website, sacredheartfeedinghills.org, or on iobserve.org. Reporting for Reel to Reel, I'm Carolee McGrath.
And once again, the Fire of Hope rally will go live the weekend of Thanksgiving. We will have a link to it all at iobserve.org. Well, this past week, our nation marked Veterans Day, honoring those who have served our country. Students from Pope Francis Preparatory High School did their part in remembering deceased veterans. David Martin reports.
Pope Francis students spent the second annual All-School Service Day at St. Michael's Cemetery searching for veteran markers on graves to mark with a flag. Because of the coronavirus, students were limited to what they were able to do to honor veterans for Veterans Day this year. John Anziano, director of campus ministry, read a newspaper story asking for volunteers, and he thought it was a great way for students to get some outdoor exercise and build community.
We really hope that our students will have a greater understanding of the sacrifices that were made to secure their freedoms. I think sometimes as Americans we take our freedom for granted, and we don't always remember all the individuals who sacrifice their time, their families, their jobs, and in some cases their lives, so that we can enjoy the many freedoms we do enjoy here in the United States.
Anziano hopes that when people come to visit the cemetery, by seeing all the flags, they will realize there are others who care about their veterans. Ethan Lichwan, a senior at Pope Francis, will be joining the Army after graduation.
For me, going into the military, it's more of a personal thing than other people. I don't have any relatives that are in the military, but I wanted to join since I was a kid, so honoring veterans on Veterans Day is a big thing. Putting flags down, making sure people respect them, and give them all the glory that they deserve for laying down the ultimate sacrifice, giving up their lives so we could have our freedom. It means a lot.
The 18-year-old was grateful to provide a service for the families who were unable to get out of the house to honor relatives themselves. Students offered prayers at each grave and made a sign of the cross upon completion.
We're told so every time we go around and put a flag in the grave, we say a little prayer for the veteran, just to rest easy, bring him into God's light, have God in their presence.
Lichwan is proud that Pope Francis celebrates veterans and honors the traditions of all the holidays. He says this allows the school to become closer to God and everyone outside of the Pope Francis community. Anziano said organizing the 320 students in such a large space was challenging, but it brought the school closer as they worked together.
And I think it beautifies the cemetery. Part of our goal is not just to place the flags, but to do some light cleaning around the graves, dusting them off and, clearing the graves that are in the ground so that, when their relatives come, they don't have to do that. They can enjoy the time they have.
Anziano believes this event reflects the Catholic social teaching of Pope Francis Preparatory School in its Christian belief in Jesus Christ and respecting life and everyone who has sacrificed their lives for others. For Reel to Reel, I'm David Martin.
What a great effort by those students. Our final story also remembers those who served. During the 1960s, the Vietnam War was the defining moment in the lives of many young men, particularly those who saw combat. One such Marine who attended the former St. Joseph's High School in North Adams recently wrote a compelling book about his Vietnam experience, as well as those of his fellow classmates and veterans. Steve Kiltonick spoke to Dennis Pregent earlier this year and has the story.
One was killed in action, another paralyzed. Several suffered debilitating injuries. Others returned to North Adams unharmed physically, but suffered emotional trauma for years. They represented the 43 members of St. Joseph's High School, class of 1965, who volunteered, enlisted in the reserves, or saw combat action in the Vietnam War. One of those veterans was a former Marine, Dennis Pregent, who wrote a book published last fall, The Boys of St. Joe's 65 in the Vietnam War, which focuses on 11 vets along with a female war protester. Now a resident of North Carolina, Prejean spoke about his book this past winter at the North Adams Museum of History, where he held a book signing. In 1965, American combat troops were sent to Vietnam for the first time by President Lyndon Johnson to stop communism from spreading. It was called the Domino Theory. Those of draft age at St. Joe's knew little, if anything, about the faraway country or the enemy they would fight. St. Joe's, which closed in 1974, was then a thriving Catholic school located in a typical small New England town. The oldest of 4 boys, Prejean grew up in the Greylock section of North Adams. His family belonged to Holy Family and Notre Dame parishes, where Prejean attended grammar school.
Everyone's dad was a veteran. We played war games as kids. We went hunting and fishing and hiking. Mom said, just be home when it gets dark. Otherwise, it was somebody's called it Tom Sawyer days.
Dennis attended Catholic schools with many of his friends going back to kindergarten. His family moved to Adams when he was in 4th grade, and Dennis wound up commuting to St. Joe's. During his senior year, Prejean was accepted at the University of Massachusetts, but growing restless, he had other plans. In the middle of his senior year, Prejean left St. Joe's for the Marines. He eventually got his diploma while in infantry training. After boot camp at Paris Island, Prejean married his high school sweetheart, Carol. The newlyweds moved to Norfolk, Virginia, where Prejean started his military career behind a desk. After a year, Prejean went to Camp Pendleton for combat training, then on to Vietnam. He recalled the first moment stepping off the plane.
It smells like a sewer. The air was so hot, it was so heavy.
Prejean was assigned to a resupply depot in Da Nang, where it was relatively safe. After 3 months, he was reassigned to an infantry squadron and at 19 became a squad leader. Prejean led patrols and ambushes around the Da Nang airfield.
As I think back now, it's a lot of responsibility, the lives of 12 people, to lead them out in the pitch black, in the darkness, and try and ambush folks.
After a 10-month tour, Prejean returned late in 1967, and with a child on the way, re-enlisted for another 3 years. His second 12-month tour in Vietnam lasted from 1970 to 1971. He first worked in finance again on the Da Nang Air Base. With the war winding down, Prejean sought action and volunteered for a more perilous job.
I really didn't like being in the rear with the gear, and I started to fly as a gunner with Helicopter Squadron 263.
On the double-rotor CH-46 helicopter, the daily mission was to both transport infantry to engage the enemy and rescue people.
More than killing people, we were saving people, I would say that, because we were transporting wounded Marines, civilians, Viet Cong.
Prejean recalled one of his last flights when they rescued a squad of Marines under heavy fire. One was seriously injured, 2 others dead. Prejean had seen enough horrors of war and eventually rotated back to Charleston, where he was out by August 1971. Prejean returned home and earned a degree in business administration from North Adams State, then an MBA from UMass. He began a 40-year-plus human resources career with Spalding, Evenflo, and Conagra before retiring in 2012. Prejean then moved to Garner, North Carolina, to be closer to his 6 children and 12 grandchildren. After leaving North Adams in 1977, Prejean never returned until 2015, when he attended St. Joe's 50th anniversary.
It just sort of got me thinking about what others had done. I knew several in the book. I knew what had happened to them, but I didn't know their life story. So I contacted the class historian and got a list of folks and started calling, especially the veterans.
Prejean narrowed his list to 11 vets, plus a female war protester, Carol Blow, at the suggestion of the publisher. She had connections to all the vets in the book. Their ages ranged from 18 to 24 while in country. 7 served in the Army, 3 in the Marines, and 1 in the Navy. All sacrificed, but some had more difficult roles.
There was a Leo Chaput who was in Vietnam in '65. He was Army Airborne paratrooper, and Joe Dano, who was a Marine infantryman. And Russell Rulier, who was killed. Russell and Joe were in the same company. Those three were in the fray almost all the time. And anybody who was with them was probably wounded or killed.
It was a somber day in June 1967 when Corporal Rulier returned home and a Marine Honor Guard carried his casket into Notre Dame Church where he once attended Mass. Rulier's best friend, Joe Dano, was also a Marine infantryman who was wounded in action and suffered a permanent disability in his right arm. Joe received a Purple Heart. Pat Lupo, a mechanized Army infantryman, was wounded in action and received a Bronze Star and Purple Heart. Mike Shalafu served in a similar position on an APC armored personnel carrier and was awarded various medals.
Ron Racine was a mortar man. He was at a lot of fire bases, took a lot of action there too. So it's just different.
Gary DeMastri was in the Navy.
He was what they call a brown water sailor. He was close to shore, helping to resupply the Marines and the Army up and down the coast.
Mike Gorman was an Army helicopter crew chief and gunner with the Black Horse Air Cavalry. A recipient of the Air Medal and Purple Heart, he was seriously wounded in 1969.
It was a struggle for Mike. He was paralyzed from about the waist down. And his life was difficult from then on.
Jim Luzinski was an Army infantryman and later joined the 101st Airborne. He was awarded the Bronze Star and several other medals. Bill Bazell served in an Army artillery unit where he operated a .50 caliber machine gun. After returning, nearly all were disabled due to gunshot wounds, exposure to Agent Orange, or PTSD, including Pregent, who was diagnosed only recently.
Most of us came back and decided to get on with our lives. We didn't have any excuses. We had some catching up to do.
2 of the vets have also passed since the Vietnam era. 3 reside in the Berkshires, while 4 others are scattered across the country. One word collectively described the group.
Resilient. I thought they were resilient. They had done a lot, they had seen a lot, they'd been through a lot, they'd been hurt. 9 out of 11 have disabilities today. And yet, in spite of that, they made successful careers, families.
Pregent felt writing the book, which was endorsed by former Senator Bob Dole, was cathartic, not only for him, but for the vets and their wives. Today a devout Catholic, in Vietnam, Pregent was discouraged by his faith because of all the mayhem.
And when you see what people do to each other, how cruel people are, it makes you question a lot of things. It's an assault on your faith and on integrity. It's just an assault on your senses. It's only coming home and realizing that God's in charge, no matter what. And coming to that I made peace with that.
Pregent looks forward to rekindling friendships with his St. Joe classmates when the school holds its 55th anniversary reunion, currently on hold. For Real to Real, I'm Steve Kiltonic.
For those interested in purchasing Dennis Pregent's book, you can find it on Amazon or through a link at iobserve.org. And for this week, that's Real to Real. As always, during the week, you can keep up with all of the latest news on the Catholic Church, both here in the Diocese of Springfield and around the world by heading over to our news and information site, iobserve.org. You can also connect there to our Catholic Communications YouTube channel, where you will find our archived stories and episodes of Real to Real. It's all found through a link at iobserve.org. And you can also like us on Facebook at Catholic Communications. And I will see you right back here next week at this same time for Real to Real, your window on the world around you.
Real to Real is a production of the Catholic Communications Corporation, funded in part by the annual Catholic Appeal, and the support of you, our faithful viewers.